Wow. Oh my God. The textures and tones in that are so amazing. Um, if you've ever heard Animals by Muse, that's like one of my top five favorite Muse songs. The nursery rhyme effect in there was great. I'm not sure what instrument that was, if that was a synth piano or something like that. The like a kind of like a bell note in the background. So I'm getting this feeling that what is being described is if you've ever cried for like hours straight and you just fall asleep from sheer mental exhaustion, or maybe specifically coming out of this dissociative state, this quote morning bell per se, waking up and speaking to the feeling itself. You kind of wake up and you're like, oh my God, am I still in this? Am I still feeling this? Am I going to be okay? And him describing, I'll trade, you can have the furniture, where's my car? Like the waking up to the mess that happened, waking up to the broken pieces internally and maybe physically, whatever havoc was wreaked, gathering your life up in the morning. Him saying, release me, please, is so scary and so real to me because I've had so many instances where dissociation wasn't saved from just a good sleep. You might wake up and you might still be in that place. It might last days at a time. It might last weeks at a time, maybe a month of just mental torture. This is really, really interesting. This is, now that I'm getting to hear this all the way through, I'm really getting the big picture that I'm taking out of it. I fucking love that track. That's one of the favorites from this. We have motion picture soundtrack, and I'm just gonna let it fade into the untitled track at the end that I believe is about under a minute long. So here we go. Finish out the album.
Why
I'm gonna play it again. I'm playing it again. I have to hear that again.
Sleeping pills help me get back to your arms. Cheap sex and sad films help me get where I belong. I think you're crazy. Maybe I think you're crazy. Maybe. Stop sending letters always get It's not like the movies. The first song, white lies. I think you're crazy. Maybe I think you're crazy. I will see in the next
I feel so intensely in my life, and all of my memories are really vivid and just, you know, abuse, relationships, friends, happy moments, sad moments, thinking about the future and death, and just obsessive thoughts all the time. From the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, everything that I have said or done right or wrong, or felt good or bad, things I have to do tomorrow, things I did yesterday, things I want to do, things I'm sad I didn't do, they're just there in my brain at all times of the day, and it's so fucking exhausting. And I slip in and out of this glazed dissociative state all the time. And to hear something for the first time try to even paint a tiny picture of what that's like is just wild. I can't wait to listen to this again on my own, all the way through, with no talking, no distractions, just soak it in again and again. I loved this. I like this a lot. I wish that last track would have just gone on for another 5 minutes and just built and built something even greater. You know, I'm curious if they've ever done motion picture soundtrack live, if they've ever extended it beyond that. The fluttering, the what would it be, like a harp kind of? The accordion slash organ or organ piano was so amazing in the beginning. It makes me think of at the end of Coldplay's Parachutes album, there is a hidden track after Everything's Not Lost, and it reminds me so much of that. And for a second there, I almost cried. I thought I was gonna. Just the reprise there at the end of all these feelings. It's so interesting how this feels like you wake up, the national anthem, you go through this day, this thing happens, you're on this ride, you wake up, you gather your thoughts, there's a reminder that life is not like the movies, it hurts way worse, it's way more real than you could ever imagine. And if you're trying hard to tell yourself it's not real, the truth is you are in reality, and this is how you feel. There's no two ways around it. This is so interesting and so many layers deep into the just creative process that may or may not have gone into this. Overall, great album. I really, really liked it. I hope you enjoyed my reaction to it. I think something I'm going to do with each of these full album reactions is kind of just read some tidbits of information off of the Wikipedia page for the album. Because usually every time I discover a new artist or listen to an album or something, I'm always reading the Wikipedia. I just like the little facts and tidbits or shit about how it was made or who's a part of the band and all that type of shit. Released October 2nd, 2000. Recorded from 1999 to April 2000. It was recorded in Paris, Copenhagen, unnamed studio in England. So multiple places. Parlophone, they share the same label as Coldplay, Parlophone Records and Capitol, produced by Nigel Godrich. After the stress of promoting Radiohead's acclaimed 1997 album OK Computer, songwriter Tom York wanted to diverge from rock music, drawing influence from electronic music, ambient music, krautrock, jazz, 20th century classical music. Radiohead used instruments such as modular synthesizers, brass and string. They processed guitar sounds, incorporated samples and loops, and manipulated their recordings with software such as Pro Tools and Cubase. York wrote impersonal and abstract lyrics, cutting up phrases and assembling them at random. That's very interesting. I know that David Bowie did that. Kid A was widely anticipated in a departure from industry practice. Radiohead released no singles or music videos and conducted few interviews and photo shoots. That's very interesting. Instead, they became one of the first major acts to use the internet as a promotional tool. Kid A was made available to stream and was promoted with short animated films featuring music and artwork. Bootlegs of early performances were shared on file-sharing services, and the album was leaked before release. In 2000, Radiohead toured Europe in a custom-built tent without corporate logos. That's very interesting. Kid A debuted at the top of the UK albums chart and became Radiohead's first #1 album, where it sold more than 207,000 copies in its first week. Its departure from Radiohead's earlier sound divided fans and critics, and some dismissed it as pretentious, deliberately obscure, or derivative. However, it later attracted acclaim. At the end of the decade, Rolling Stone, Pitchfork, and The Times ranked Kid A the greatest album of the 2000s, and in 2020, Rolling Stone ranked it number 20 on its updated list of the 500 greatest album of all time. Wow! Number 20. Like OK Computer, it won the Grammy Award for Best Alternative Album. It was nominated for the Grammy Award Album of the Year. It has been certified platinum in multiple countries. Following the critical and commercial success of the 1997 album OK Computer, the members of Radiohead suffered burnout. Tom York became ill, describing himself as a complete fucking mess, completely unhinged. Troubled by new acts he felt were imitating Radiohead, he believed his music had become part of a constant background noise he described as fridge buzz and became hostile to the music media. He told The Guardian, "I always used to use music as a way of moving and dealing with things, and I sort of felt like the thing that helped me deal with things had been sold to the highest bidder, and I was simply doing its bidding, and I couldn't handle that." He suffered from writer's block and could not finish writing songs on guitar. He became disillusioned with the mythology of rock music, feeling the genre had run its course. He began to listen almost exclusively to electronic music of Warp, artists such as Boards of Canada, Aphex Twin, and said it was refreshing because the music was all structures and had no human voices in it. But I felt just as emotional about it as I'd ever felt about guitar music. He liked the idea of his voice being used as an instrument rather than having a leading role, and wanted to focus on sounds and textures instead of traditional songwriting, which is exactly what I think everyone would pick up on listening to this album. York bought a house in Cornwall and spent his time walking the cliffs and drawing, restricting his musical activity to playing the grand piano he had recently bought. Everything in Its Right Place was the first song he wrote. He described himself as a shit piano player with little knowledge of electronic instruments. I remember this Tom Waits quote from years ago, that what keeps him going as a songwriter is his complete ignorance of the instruments he's using. So everything's a novelty. That's one of the reasons I wanted to get into computers and synths, because I didn't understand how the fuck they worked, and I had no idea what ADSR meant. That's kind of, Dave Grohl speaks often about how he can't read music and he doesn't understand music theory to any capacity, but yet this guy has consistently cranked out some of the most classic drum fills and guitar riffs you've ever heard. Guitarist Ed O'Brien had hoped Radiohead's fourth album would comprise short melodic guitar songs, but York stated there was no chance of the album sounding like that. I'd completely had it with melody. I wanted rhythm. All melodies to me were pure embarrassment. Bassist Colin Greenwood said, "We felt we had to change everything. There were other guitar bands out there trying to do similar things. We had to move on." Radiohead began work on Kid A in Paris in January 1999 with OK Computer producer Nigel Godrich and no deadline. Great. York, who had the greatest control, was still facing writer's block. His new songs were incomplete, and some consisted of little more than sounds or rhythms. Few had clear verses or choruses. York's lack of lyrics created problems, and as these had provided points of reference and inspiration for the bandmates in the past. The group struggled with York's new direction. York didn't communicate much. According to York, Godrich didn't understand why, if we had such a strength in one thing, we would want to do something else. Multi-instrumentalist Johnny Greenwood feared awful art rock nonsense just for its own sake. His brother Colin did not enjoy York's warp influences, finding them really cold. The other band members were unsure of how to contribute and consider leaving. Wow. O'Brien said, "It's scary. Everyone feels insecure. I'm a guitarist, and suddenly it's like, well, there are no guitars on this track or no drums." Radiohead experimented with electronic instruments, including modular synthesizers and early electronic instruments similar to a theremin, and used software such as Pro Tools and Cubase to edit and manipulate their recordings. The group found it difficult to use electronic instruments and techniques collaboratively. According to York, we had to develop ways of going off into corners and build things on whatever synthesizer piece of machinery we would bring into the equation, and then integrate that into the way we would normally work. O'Brien began using sustain units, which allow guitar notes to be sustained infinitely, combined with looping and delay effects to create synthesizer-like sounds, which is what I see when I see that national anthem Saturday Night Live performance, where you can see the looping happening. You can see him reaching down and messing with the boards. In March, Radiohead moved to Medley Studios in Copenhagen for 2 weeks, which was unproductive. The sessions produced about 50 reels of tape, each containing 15 minutes of music with nothing finished. In April, Radiohead resumed recording in a mansion in Batsford Park, Gloucestershire. The lack of deadline and the number of incomplete ideas made it hard to focus, and the group held tense meetings. They agreed to disband if they could not agree on an album worth releasing. Wow, this almost calls the end. And now it's this huge praised thing. In July, O'Brien began keeping an online diary of Radiohead's progress and moved out of their studio into their hometown of Oxford. In November, Radiohead held a live webcast from their studio featuring a performance of new music and a DJ set. By 2000, 6 songs were complete. In January, at Godrich's suggestion, Radiohead split into 2 groups. One would generate a sound or sequence without acoustic instruments such as guitars or drums, and the other would develop it. Though the experiments produced no finished songs, it helped convince O'Brien of the potential of electronic instruments. Wow. On April 19th, 2000, York wrote on Radiohead's website they had finished recording, having completed over 20 songs. Radiohead considered a double album but felt the material was too dense. Instead, they saved half the songs for the next album, Amnesiac. Released the following year, York said Radiohead split the work into 2 albums because they cancel each other out as overall finished things. They come from 2 different places. He observed that deciding the track list was not just a matter of choosing the best songs, as you can pull all the best songs in the world on a record and they'll ruin each other. He cited the later Beatles album as examples of effective sequencing. How in the hell can you have 3 different versions of Revolution on the same record and get away with it? I thought about that sort of thing. Agreeing on the track list, creating arguments, and O'Brien said the band came close to breaking up. That felt like it could go either way, it could break, but we came in the next day and it was resolved. The album was mastered by Chris Blair in Abbey Road Studios. Very interesting. York wrote an early version of National Anthem when the band was still in school in 1997. Radiohead recorded drums and bass for the song, intending to develop it for a B-side for OK Computer, but decided to keep it for the next album. For Kid A, Greenwood added sounds sampled from radio stations, and York's vocals were processed with a ring modulator. In 1999, Radiohead recorded a brass section inspired by the organized chaos of Town Hall concert by the jazz musician Charles Mingus, instructing the musicians to sound like a traffic jam. The strings on How to Disappear Completely were performed by the Orchestra of St. John's and recorded in Dorchester Abbey, a 12th century church about 5 miles from Radiohead's Oxfordshire studio. Radiohead chose the orchestra as they had performed pieces by Penderecki and Messiaen. Johnny Greenwood, the only Radiohead member trained in music theory, composed the string arrangement by multi-tracking his Ondes Martenot. According to Godrich, when the orchestra members saw Greenwood's score, they all just sort of burst into giggles because they couldn't do what he'd written because it was impossible for them anyway. The orchestra leader, John Lubbock, encouraged them to experiment and work with Greenwood's ideas. Concerts director Alison Atkinson said the session was more experimental than the orchestra's usual bookings. Idiotech samples 2 computer music pieces, Paul Lansky's Mild und Leise and Arthur Krieger's short piece. Both samples were taken from Electronic Music Winners, a 1976 experimental music LP, which Johnny Greenwood stumbled upon while the band was working on Kid A. The track was built from a drum machine pattern Greenwood created with a modular synthesizer and a sample from Mild und Leise. He gave the 50-minute recording to York, who took a short section of it and used it to write the song. York also referred to electronic dance music when talking about Idiotech, and the song was an attempt to capture that exploding beat sound when you're at the club and the PA is so loud. That's exactly actually what it sounded like. It's going pss, 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 kind of like a popping. Motion picture soundtrack was written before Radiohead's debut single, Creep. And a version of it was recorded on piano during the OK Computer sessions. York recorded it on a pedal organ, influenced by songwriter Tom Waits. The other band members added sampled harp and double bass. That's interesting about the pedal organ and Tom Waits, because when I first heard that, it kind of reminded me also of the accordion in Low Man's Lyric off of Metallica's Reload, and I know James Hetfield is a massive Tom Waits fan, so I wonder if that had any comparison there. Radiohead also worked on several songs that were not completed until recording sessions for future albums, including Nude, Burn the Witch, and True Love Waits. The Kid A artwork and packaging was created by York with Stanley Donwood, who has worked with Radiohead since their 94 EP, My Iron Lung. Donwood painted on large canvases with knives and sticks, then photographed the paintings and manipulated them with Photoshop. While working on the artwork, York and Donwood became obsessed with the World Watch Institute website, which was full of scary statistics about ice caps melting and weather patterns changing. This inspired them to use an image of a mountain range as the cover art. Donwood said he saw the mountains as some sort of cataclysmic power. Donwood was inspired by a photograph taken during the Kosovo War depicting a square meter of snow full of the detritus of war, such as military equipment and cigarette stains. He said, I was upset by it in a way war had never upset me before. It felt like it was happening in my street. The red swimming pool in the album spine and disc was inspired by the 1988 graphic novel Brought to Light by Alan Moore and Bill Sienkiewicz, in which the number of people killed by state terrorism is measured in swimming pools filled with blood. That's disturbing. Donwood said this image haunted him during the recording of the album, called it a symbol of looming danger and shattered expectations. York and Donwood cited an exhibition of paintings by David Hockney they attended in Paris before recording started as another influence. York and Donwood made many versions of the album cover with different pictures and different titles and different typefaces. Unable to decide, they taped them to the kitchen cupboards and went to bed. According to Donwood, the choice the next day was obvious. In October 2021, York and Donwood curated an exhibition of Kid A artwork at Christie's headquarters in London. Huh. And I saw this year that Kid Amnesia has come out, so now I know what that mesh project means. Critical reception, Kid A was widely anticipated. Spin described it as the most anticipated rock record since Nirvana's In Utero. Months before its release, Melody Maker wrote, "If there's one band that promises to return rock to us, it's Radiohead." After Kid A had been played for critics, many bemoaned the lack of guitar, obscured vocals, and unconventional song structures, and some called the album a commercial suicide note. Wow. I fucking love an underdog release. The Guardian wrote the muted electronic hums, pulses, and tones, predicting that it would confuse listeners. Mojo wrote that upon first listen, Kid A is just awful. Too often it sounds like the fragments that they began the writing process with a loop, a riff, a mumbled line of text, have been set in concrete and had other lesser ideas piled on top. Guardian critic Adam Sweeting wrote that even listeners raised on krautrock or Ornette Coleman will find Kid A mystifying experience, and that it pandered to the worst cliches about Radiohead's relentless miserableism. Several critics felt Kid A was pretentious or deliberately obscure. The Irish Times bemoaned the lack of conventional song structures, again. Panned the album was a deliberately obtruse, willfully esoteric, and wantonly unfathomable. The only thing challenging about Kid A is the very real challenge to your attention span. In the New Yorker, novelist Nick Hornby wrote that it was morbid proof that this sort of self-indulgence results in a weird kind of anonymity rather than something distinctive and original. Jesus! Melody Maker critic Mark Beaumont called it tubby, ostentatious, self-congratulatory. Look, ma, I could suck my own cock, whiny old rubbish. About 60 songs were started that no one had a bloody clue how to finish. Alexis Petridis of The Guardian described it as self-consciously awkward and bloody-minded, the noise made by a band trying so hard to make a difficult album that they felt it beneath them to write any songs. Jesus! Rolling Stone, humorless, derivative, and lacking in songs. They wrote, because it was decided that Radiohead were important and significant last time around, no one can accept the album as the crockpot art project it so obviously is. Wow, that's so amazing that this got absolutely flamed. And now they all turned around. I wonder how many did just for going with the crowd. Some critics felt the electronic elements were unoriginal. In the New York Times, Howard Hampton dismissed Radiohead as a rock composite and wrote that Kid A recycles Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon solipsism to me-decade perfection. Beaumont said Radiohead were simply plowing furrows dug by DJ Shadow and Brian Eno before them. I love the album Introducing by DJ Shadow, by the way. I just heard that a week or two ago. Fucking awesome trip-hop album. AllMusic gave a favorable review. Spin said Kid A was not the act of career suicide or feat of self-indulgence it was castigated as, and predicted that fans would recognize it as Radiohead's best and bravest album. Billboard described it as an ocean of unparalleled musical depth and the first truly groundbreaking album of the 21st century. Robert Christgau wrote that Kid A was an imaginative, imitative variation on a pop staple, Sadness Made Pretty. The Village Voice called it oblique, 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 also incredibly beautiful. Pitchfork gave Kid A perfect score, calling it cacophonous yet tranquil, experimental yet familiar, foreign yet womb-like, spacious yet visceral, textured yet vaporous, awakening yet dreamlike. I follow Pitchfork on Instagram, and their followers are always flaming them for trying to make it sound like the writers at Pitchfork love to hear themselves talk. He concluded that Radiohead must be the greatest band alive, if not the best since You Know Who. The piece was one of the first Kid A reviews posted online, shared widely by Radiohead fans. It helped popularize Pitchfork and became notorious for its obtuse writing. Wow. Legacy. In years following its release, Kid A attracted acclaim. In 2005, Pitchfork wrote that it had challenged and confounded Radiohead's audience and subsequently transformed into an intellectual symbol of sorts. Owning it became getting it became anointing it. In 2015, Rob Sheffield of Rolling Stone likened Radiohead's change in style to Bob Dylan's controversial move to rock music, writing that critics now hesitated to say they had disliked it at the time. He described Kid A as the defining moment of the Radiohead legend. A year later, Billboard argued that Kid A was the first album since Bowie's Low to have moved rock and electronic music forward in such a mature fashion. All these fucking corporate outlets just going back on everything they said. Bunch of fucking hacks. In an article for Kid A's 20th anniversary, The Quietist suggested that the negative reviews had been motivated by rockism, the tendency among music critics to venerate rock music over other genres. Some critics still dislike the album. In a 2011 Guardian article about his critical Melody Maker review, Beaumont wrote that though his opinion had not changed, Kid A's status as a cultural cornerstone has proved me, if not wrong, then very much in the minority. Peoples whose opinions I trust claim it to be their favorite album ever. In 2014, Bryce Ezell of Pop Matters wrote that Kid A is more fun to think and write about than it is to actually listen to, and a far less compelling representation of the band's talents than The Bends and OK Computer. In 2016, Dorian Linsky wrote in The Guardian, at times Kid A is dull enough to make you fervently wish that they'd merged the highlights with the best bits of the similarly spotty Amnesiac. York had given up on coherent lyrics, so one can only guess at what he was worrying about. Radiohead denied they had set out to create difficult music. Johnny Greenwood argued that the tracks were short and melodic, and suggested that people basically want their hands held through 12 Mollivkin tears. It's true. It's actually a very easy listen. I don't know where. I mean, that goes to show how radical of a project this would have been at the time. York said, we're actually trying to communicate, but somewhere along the line, we just seem to piss off a lot of people. What we're doing isn't that radical. He recalled that the band had been white as a sheet before earlier performances of the Kid A tour, thinking they had been absolutely trashed. At the same time, their reaction motivated them. There was a sense of a fight to convince people, which was actually really exciting. He regretted having released no singles, feeling it meant much of the early judgment from the album came from critics. Credited Kid A for pioneering the use of internet to stream and promote music. That is very interesting. Kid A invented modern music culture as we know it. In his 2005 book, Killing Yourself to Live, critic Chuck Klosterman interpreted Kid A as a prediction of the September 11 attacks. Speaking at Radiohead's induction to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019, David Byrne of Talking Heads, one of Radiohead's formative influences, said, what was really weird and very encouraging was that Kid A was popular. It was a hit. It proved to me that the artistic risk paid off and music fans sometimes are not stupid. In 2020, Billboard wrote that the success of Kid A, despite its challenging content, established Radiohead as heavy hitters in the business for the long run. In 2006, Time named Kid A one of the 100 best albums, calling it the opposite of easy listening and the weirdest album to ever sell 1 million copies. But also a testament to just how complicated pop music can be. At the end of the decade, Rolling Stone, Pitchfork, and The Times ranked Kid A the greatest album of the 2000s. The Guardian ranked it second best, calling it a jittery premonition of the troubled, disconnected, overloaded decade to come. The Guardian, man, fucking out to get him. The sound of today, in other words, a decade earlier. In 2021, Pitchfork readers voted Kid A the greatest album of the previous 25 years. Man. Wow. There we go, guys. Radiohead, Kid A, album fully done. First inaugural full album reaction. That was a very fun trip, and I like delving into the kind of story behind the album afterwards. I think I'm going to keep doing that. Any recommendations down to the fucking diameter as far as how to better my content is appreciated. I am not here to stow away from criticism. If you think my reaction or conversation about the album was hacky, let me know. If you are here and you're watching this, that means you are officially a Patreon subscriber, and I'm so fucking happy to have you. I'm doing my best to wrap my head around this and delivering something that is worth, the price. Keep in touch as far as my official Instagram and the community polls and posts on my YouTube channel. That is going to determine how much you are integrated to having a say in what I listen to next. I would like to do a poll every other week when I'm about to do my albums, throw 4 out there that I'm willing to do and let you guys choose over time. This has been really fun. I fucking loved this album. Kid A, fantastic starter, fantastic entry. Have a good one. I will see you in the next one.